to the council chambers in the city of Rockaway for our monthly preparedness meeting. Tonight's subject will be about wildfires, wildfire safety, and kind of wherever you guys want to take it. So for those, I think everybody in the room knows me, but I'm Todd Hesse, Fire Chief for the city of Rockaway. And I got to mention, thank you. I have to mention we do have a special guest here tonight, Lieutenant Alicia Mizzy Riggert from Nehalem Bay Fire Rescue. She is their education specialist, I will call her. She's an amazing teacher, so she's here to kind of, I may pick on her and ask some questions from her, but she's kind of here to observe tonight, so please welcome her too, because she's a heck of an asset to the fire service in our region. So tonight, oh boy, we're going to talk about wildfire and wildfire safety. Kind of whatever direction you want to take it. I do have a PowerPoint we'll go through with the key points I want you to take home, but this is also a great time for questions and answers from the public and their concerns. So I'm going to start this out though with a little bit of trivia. You guys like trivia? Can anybody tell me, without going to your phones, my kids would be Googling something or TikToking or Insta something it, but can somebody tell me what happened on October 8th, 1871? What? Wait a minute, I wasn't even around then. No, this was kind of one of these big events that everybody's heard. I guarantee you everybody knows what this is. They just don't know what this is.
Was it the first Tillman burn?
No.
Chicago?
Mm-hmm. This was the Great Chicago Fire, right? October 8th, 1871. It's what started fire prevention. It's why we do a lot of things we do today. But it's not all about Chicago. Does anybody else know what happened that very same day? Oh, it was actually more catastrophic than the Chicago fire. And it's a little piece of history that got pushed away. Has anybody ever heard of the town of Peshtigo, Wisconsin? No. And everybody's shaking their heads, no, I haven't. What? No. Wildfire. It was the largest wildfire in the United States history. It killed between 1,500 and 2,500 people. They don't know how many. It burned 1.2 million acres. It got overshadowed because of the Great Chicago Fire. So here is this town, and it actually burned 2 communities and a lot of small towns. But it was the most catastrophic wildfire in history, in the United States history, and there's a handful of very educated folks in this room that did not even know about that. Very interesting. So wildfire's been around for a long time. Catastrophic wildfire, long time. So today we're going to talk though not about that fire, but about what you can do about our community and what we can do to prevent that happening here. We're very fortunate though, as we do live in a wetter climate, but can it burn here? Mm-hmm. Somebody mentioned the Tillamook burn, right? A couple years ago, there was the Pike Road fire. There was a fire I was down in Lincoln City, and I was shocked actually at the fire behavior, and we'll talk about fire behavior later in the presentation, but what I saw even along the coast, I couldn't believe the coast could burn like that. So, without any further ado though, I want to ask you this loaded question. Are you ready for one? And are you prepared? But what are your concerns right now about City of Rockaway, your area? What do you think is your concerns? I want to kind of hear an audience participation. Water? As far as just water supply? Yes. Well, if push ever came to shove, that big blue thing out there will provide us all the water we ever need if we had to fight a fire. Suppression wise. We don't want to use it, but we can.
Would that do any things at salt water? Would that be doing any damage to your equipment?
Oh, our pumps? Maybe, but we're gonna flush them out and clean them out when we're done. So minimal. Just make sure you flush and clean things out. But I'm not real worried. Like I kind of talked to some of you before. Our reservoirs hold millions of gallons of water. And I think we're in pretty good shape actually for suppression. They keep those at a level that always gives us a lot of water for suppression. We also have neighboring departments. If we were running short, maybe Garibaldi has water, maybe Nehalem has water, and we have tenders that can shuttle it in if we ever really got in that situation. But okay, so water, that's a big concern, and I appreciate that.
And there's Lake Lytle.
Oh, well, yeah, and then you do have the freshwater lakes as long as they hold water, and Lake Lytle holds water year round. And I think I told some of you, we draft and practice. That's one of our draft sites that we can pump 1,000+ gallons a minute out of there. That's a lot of suppression.
I think one of my big
Sure.
concerns is what happened in California, Berkeley, in that residential area that caught fire, and nobody could get out, the cars, trying to figure out the cars, and we only have this one highway, and everybody's going to be hitting it, so how do you get out for other people to do your job?
So evacuation.
That too, because during 4th of July, you got this place packed full of people in cars and illegal fireworks. And
Oh boy, right?
So I agree.
What gives us a fortunate thing at 4th of July is we're still, the fuels are not cured out very well. So big wildfires are hard to happen that early in the season. The fire would still be something we could very easily manage, we hope, but we never know. Great question. Evacuation, how do we evacuate? Do we have a plan to evacuate? We'll talk about evacuations a little bit later on. But that's a great point because there is only one egress route, Highway 101, to get out of town.
And we can't, the sand, you're not going to be able to drive on the sand.
Right, but I believe most of our threat, if we do have a threat, is in our interface, mostly. Coming down the hill, up against the trees, up against the timber where the residential meets the wildland. And we should be able to, with all the resources we have in this county, be able to keep it from getting into our houses. But you're gonna have to play along, and that's part of what we're gonna talk about, being prepared in defensible space. Good, Mary.
One of my concerns is information, like when something like this happens, how do we let all the people in town, tourists in town know where to go, what to do? How do we communicate with the people in town about this?
Well, and that would be where you would use the reverse 911, and where they can blanket with that general information of wildfire in the area, everybody in this zone needs to evacuate. Those really work. Those backwards, and everybody's got a cell phone, which most of us carry, can't be without, right? Everybody got one?
No.
No? We got, no cell phone.
No.
Wow. Okay, now you open up a whole new can of worms and a new dynamic.
And there's spots in town where even if they have a cell phone, they don't have good service.
Okay, which goes back to that whole can of worms when we talk about notification for a tsunami or anything else. We'll have to go a little bit for those that don't have technology or technology doesn't work. Great question. Great. So I came here hoping to have answers for everything you can ask. And right off the bat, you already got me turned sideways thinking. Thanks. But no, I appreciate it because that's what we're here for as a group, right? Is to identify the problems and try to find the solutions. But yeah, those are two great catches. Go ahead, Nancy.
Thank you. Regarding the coast range that you were talking about, timber and coming down, do all the lumber timber companies, are they required to do a big fire line behind these initial?
No.
Okay.
They can be right up to, because their timberland ends and our residential starts. So where that interface is, where those two connect, I suspect most of them would work with you if you wanted to clear out around your house and ask to thin back. Maybe that may be an option. I don't know.
And maybe they should be mandated to do that.
And that might be pretty rough. But I'm not saying you're wrong. But that's why we're here though tonight, to show you what you can do as a homeowner and a landowner in that interface. So any other concerns? What are you thinking? You three got to be thinking something. No?
I
that the person that owns 2 lots behind me,
Okay.
they totally cut all the trees in the lot that's right behind me and left everything.
Yes. Yeah, and there's no ordinance against that, which is really hard, but it does, it leaves fuel. And we'll talk about fuel and fuel breaks and why you remove fuel. Pat can tell you a story of what happens with slash and what piles of slash will do. So there's some interesting concerns there. Go ahead, Nancy.
What you're thinking of, we have a lot of abandoned buildings, dilapidated buildings, and
Yes. So those are identified as, threats to fuel a wildfire, right? Okay. Well, you give me some good concerns. We'll go ahead and do this presentation, and I want you to be thinking about things that we do answer for the questions you have, and then at the end we'll open it back up to questions for the presentation and what's actually our concerns. Because we're going to pick on Nehalem for a minute, but we don't care what happens in Nehalem, do we? We don't care what happens in Garibaldi. We are concerned about what we do here. What we help them. Oh yeah, we do all kinds of stuff. But our goal is always be focused on what does Rockaway need? What do we need in our interface? What do we need for our problems? So that's the direction I kind of want you thinking. We do have some unique things. I will tell you this, when it's 90 degrees in Nehalem, guess what? It's 63 degrees here, and we got a little fog. Do we have different fire behavior? That will come up here pretty soon. They have a way higher risk of wildfire than we do just because of weather. And we'll talk about how important later weather is. But think about things like that. We have to always be thinking about us. We're going to be selfish today. So be prepared. These pictures, maybe I'll shut the lights down here for a second, guys. A little bit so you can see that presentation a little better. Because I want you to see the pictures and be able to read some of these slides. So this is obviously a pretty good wildfire. You got some fire burning through the trees. This causing a lot of destruction. And we always kind of think it's in the woods. Just burning 1 million acres of timber. Okay, that's not good. But these can be catastrophic. It isn't always just loss of life or loss of property. It's also loss of our timberlands, and these are big deals. So, but wildfires are no joke, especially where it's in our interface or where we could be affected by it. So there's a FireWise program. We'll touch on it a little bit today. We're going to touch on about 4 different programs here. The slides cover stuff from the Oregon State Fire Marshal, FireWise, like Alicia said earlier, we were talking on the phone, she says, well, NFPA, there's all kinds of little slides in there because each of them have a good little picture or maybe information that is very beneficial to us. So I took a piece of each. I know, Councilor McGinnis, we've talked about having a formal program in our community, and I've been doing some research on the FireWise program, and I believe that's the direction we'll go. It gives good information. It gives us a way to check our interface and safety it up. So we're in the process of working on that right now. Do you realize that Bay City is the only department or city that has a FireWise program right now? And we can't let them lead the way all the time. We're gonna get in there too. Anyway, so FireWise, though, is a program that helps with this, what this next slide says, and that's defensible space. So the best way I can define defensible space is give us as fire departments a fighting chance. So if I said I have a house because I always wanted to live in the woods, and I want the trees right up to my house, and I want a cedar shake roof, and I want my wood pile close because I don't want to walk out and get wood, and everything's close, combustible. Does that sound like a recipe for disaster or something I should build? Okay, so defensible space, and we're going to talk about, excuse me, living with fire. And this slide I thought was very, very good to start us off with about what a defensible space is. So I don't want to block this at all, but if you have a house near the woods, near the timber, near the trees, start with the 0 to 5 foot zone. When we go, well, I know Alicia's been on conflagrations and so have I. One of the first things they do is they have us triage these houses. They'll say, okay, the fire is burning in the timber 3 miles from this X town. And the first thing they're going to have us structure personnel do is go identify each of the structures inside that zone. And we're going to go up to them with a little checklist. And we're going to see, is there defensible space? Is the wood pile next to the house? Is it cedar shake? Do they have a non-combustible materials building their house? Is there things that give us a chance or not? And guess what the first thing we get to do? We get to put a red X that says, nope, not defendable. Now we get to put a green that we can defend, depending on the system you're using. It tells us, is it defendable or not defendable? So we won't risk ourselves to save your structure if you didn't do the work ahead of time. Is that pretty well said, Alicia? So we won't do it.
So do you do that like once a year before there will be a fire, so the homeowner has, they should be responsible to?
I would say if we get a formal program, we'll ask for volunteer cooperation of everybody that's in the interface
To do that checklist.
to do that checklist and give free inspections of the home and the interface and advice. But it can't be a mandatory program. We can't say we force you, Catherine, to do it. So it's a voluntary. But we're talking when we actually get activated. When we get called, we've been called all over the state. The first time I was called, I'll give you a fast story because I love stories. I went to Multnomah Falls in 1989. It was one of the first times that the Conflagration Act had been enacted. And we get there at night, the wind's blowing. We're thinking we're firefighters, we're just gonna go out and spray water, we're gonna put this fire out. We realize the wind's blowing 70 miles an hour, it's burning all down the canyon, and they'd have us just wait till daylight. So we didn't know what to do. We wait till daylight, they take us up to Corbett. We went up the hill to Corbett, get up there to the fire station, they said, okay, you 10 fire engines, you are gonna go out to these houses and you're gonna triage them. We didn't even know how to spell triage. We had no idea what they were talking about. And they said, no, you're gonna go see if you can defend these houses or not. So we went back in this area. The fire's burning. It's coming towards us. It's miles out, but it's coming. And we go and they give us this little checklist, says, well, can you defend it or not? First house I go to, there's trees right up to it. The wood pile's next to the house. The fuel tank for the diesel's right next to the house. It's like, wow, we have to make that decision. We're not gonna save your house. That doesn't make you as a landowner very happy, does it? But I go to Sue's house and she's got green grass around it, it's mowed, the wood pile's out in the shed 50 yards away. Guess what? She gets the little green mark and says, hey, we can put a resource, we can put an engine there, we can put sprinklers there, we can do whatever we need to help. Oh, by the way, we would try to save your house if we have time. I can't tell you how much brush we've cut down and how much yard work we've done for a homeowner trying to save your house. So I guess if you catastrophic wildfire, you're gonna get a chance to get some landscaping done by the fire department. We're not the best at it, I'm gonna tell you that right off the bat. But defensible space, when you start looking at this, you get that green zone. You get where it's thin fuel, lean, clean, and green zone to 30 foot. You give us 30 foot on flat ground, we got a pretty good chance we're not gonna lose your house. Takes a little bit more if you got a slope, just topography and what that does. And then where kind of Nancy, where you're kind of going is this 30 to 100 foot where your house meets the interface. If you can thin that down, it makes a huge difference. But I will also tell you, we have a benefit here in Rockaway is most of our interface is burning downhill towards us. And that, just topography gives us a fighting chance. Because backing fires are way easier than fighting something from above. We're not standing in the chimney, we're down below where we can control it. So, this is what I thought was a good picture just to show you what that's all about in that zone. So this next slide is from Firewise. And this, like I say, there's handouts. If you want more information or want this PowerPoint, I will send it to you because there's some good stuff in it. But again, Firewise goes with make sure you have 30 feet around your structure. Grass is green and mowed, or you have green something. I'm going to show you a picture here of a fire that actually did burn and they were able to save it, and we're going to discuss why. But make sure you like your wood piles away. You have avoid outdoor burning. That's a big debate even in this town, outdoor burning. And I know it is. Because unfortunately some people don't burn by the rules. And that's a problem. Not only for nuisance, but also for wildfire. Just because you can burn doesn't mean you should burn. It's kind of one of those things. But if you do it right. And there's some burning safety information up here. Any question? Go ahead.
I'm curious because we're talking about this nice green grass 30 feet around. And if you look at most of Rockaway, there's like 5 or 10 feet.
There's a 5-foot yard.
Is there another diagram that makes crammed-in houses more defensible?
Well, the nice thing about crammed-in houses is hopefully your houses are built with more non-combustible materials. Because really what carries fire is the natural vegetation. That's if you're burning house to house to house, you better have a heck of a wind behind it, and we better not be doing our jobs very well. We have ways and we have techniques that'll, we get a house on fire. Although I will say they had wind down in Nestucca last week, and they ended up, the houses were so close together, they ended up damaging 3 houses significantly. But that is proximity, and that is a threat in some of our areas that we do have identified. You take the Strand, for example, you can't even walk down some of those places to get to them. You know, there's little pathways to a house. And yeah, does it make it more challenging? Of course it does. But that's a good question. Most of what we're concerned about is where we interface with the wildland. Can we get embers spotting quarter mile away? Absolutely. So we have to be concerned about that and watch some of those places that, you know, maybe have shake roofs, or there's a lot of cedar siding in this town, isn't there? What's it take to burn, what's too much? What's it take to burn cedar? One spark about 3 blocks down could light your whole house on fire, right? It's something that burns very easily, doesn't take long to dry out and get going for you. So be aware of that, and great question. And keep challenging me with those, because those are the things that we worry about. It's like notifications. So you brought up earlier, good point. How do we let everybody know? So we have to work on that one too, but most of the stuff in town is defensible. Even 5 foot of green, it's pretty amazing how much you can get by with that way. The Firewise, so we go from the diagram to create that defensible space, take out dead vegetation. It does rely a lot on the homeowner, and I think one of you brought up a good point. We have people that just don't care. So what do you do when your neighbor, Penny, does not care? They just dump all their trees over and leave them in a pile. Now you gotta, we don't have an ordinance, we don't have a way to really combat that. We can talk to owners, but what happens with that? Do they comply? They don't have to. And that becomes an issue. I like the head shake there, because you're correct. It is about, compliance. You want to take care of your place, but I don't know. Anybody answers that? Oh, go ahead.
Well, my question, you said not having ordinances. When I was living out in Deschutes County, we got a flyer from the state marshal,
Sure.
fire marshal, and basically all the counties and cities went by what we got from them, from BLM and forestry, and there were some pretty hefty fines to that. I mean, I don't ever want to see bitterbrush again.
Right, well, right, and you're correct. There are, for like weeds or debris, it takes time and there's a process to it. I shouldn't have maybe said it quite the way I did, but it's a difficult process. If somebody just falls a few trees, it's really difficult, because the place doesn't look really that bad. It doesn't look overgrown. It doesn't look doesn't meet some of those thresholds that you could really go after. You know, you get weeds, dry grass this tall, it's pretty easy, right? Yeah, we can even go and mitigate the problem and then send the landowner the bill. But there's a process to it. It's not just, we just go do it. It can't be arbitrary, and it becomes a real challenge. But, okay, the other Swain sister.
I was gonna say though, this is
I
something we
get,
need to work on.
I've got them
It could
confused
be an
before.
ordinance, even though we don't have it now. It could be something.
Well, sure, it may be something that we work for and we talk to the council to make sure this is I know this is a serious concern of the council, is to make sure we have the rules and regulations in place to be able to enforce some of these things. And you gotta be, you gotta be careful how we do this. There's a lot to it, but definitely in a discussion phase, you know, maybe even next week at our meeting, that's something we could bring up. So, but we want to remove fuels, keep your gutters clear, keep the dry, burnable stuff away from your house. It's about that simple. And if whether you have 5 feet or 50 feet or 100 feet, do your part. And that's what we hope that every normal, regular citizen would embrace and say, well, yeah, it's for the good of the community. Because I'd sure hate to see your house burn and then it burns Mary's down because you were non-compliant. That wouldn't make you feel very good, would it? You know, you got all the green around your place, and yeah, she let her place go. Sorry. Yeah, and that doesn't do anything, does it? So, but sometimes these discussions bring up more work than you intended when you started. But tonight isn't meant to scare you. It's just meant to, let's have this community discussion about what we can do. So, we want to keep, also like driveways and roadways. Maybe you have a house in the woods. Better clear your driveway, make sure we can get back in there. Because there are places in this town that meet code because when they were built, but I can't get a fire engine into them. Isn't that amazing? And I can't go back, can't change code. When they were built to the code of the time. I hit a rock the other day with my pickup trying to make a corner up in the Strand. How am I going to get a fire engine in there if I can't get my pickup in there? But those citizens, they want service. So it provides us challenges. Nancy.
The railroad ties are ubiquitous in Rockaway Beach, so what exactly are you talking about for that ladder field for railroad ties? Everybody's got them.
Well, right, in their around the yard, lining their flower beds and yeah, we knocked one over today on a call. So yeah, you're correct. But why are they a problem? Creosote, they burn fast, hot, and catch real easy. Other than that, they're great.
And steam.
Oh yeah. Yeah, good point. Good catch. But you want to take out ladder fuels, meaning like low-hanging brush, grass that grows up, anything that can carry fire up into the canopies of the trees. Because that's where you really get the bad fires, when the fire grows up into the trees and gets moving. And we'll talk about fire behavior coming up here. The first part, though, is all on defensible space and why we do it. So, I like this cartoon. I like a little humor. I think it's important. So, you know, usually there would be sticks and straw, and we went firewise, meaning we build it all out of bricks and non-combustible materials, right? So why is that important? The next picture will show you why it's important to have a defensible space, to build with the proper construction. I'll just show it to you. So this was in Santa Barbara County. And you'll notice they kept a defensible space around their house. They have a metal roof, minimal combustible siding, and guess what? The fire passed right by them. It's not a miracle. That's what it's supposed to happen. They may have even had a fire engine there. It looks like it probably to me because it looks like there's a line out front that they stopped it at. But they were able to do that because they had a defensible space to work in. And that fire just passes on and off to the next house. This is something that we do all the time. Maybe not here, but in our past lives and careers when we were in more wildland areas, This is a common theme. Do you think that homeowner's happy now? Yeah. They're not happy with their landscaping or outside. They think, well, that's a heck of a view, but their house and their possessions are still there. And that matters.
And it all comes back 1 year later anyway.
It'd be green out there next year. The sagebrush will take a little bit to come back, but it'll be green again next year. At least cheatgrass will be back. But, a couple of junipers, they didn't burn the junipers, burned a few of the brush. That's what defensible space will give you. I think that's a great illustration. So no pun intended, but let that burn in good how important defensible space is to you. So, I was going to ask you, what causes wildfires?
Lightning.
Lightning?
I saw
Oh, you saw lightning? Oh man, you're jumping the gun. How much does lightning cause though?
Not as much as humans.
Oh, that's interesting. What do you think the difference is?
stupidity.
Well, on the lightning smart, you're telling me?
No, that's another.
Over 80% human cause.
Over 80%, anybody want to go higher? Possibly. Well, I'll tell you what, the first slide I'm going to show you shows 85% of wildfires are human caused. Whether it be arson, careless burning, power lines, whatever, they had a human factor to it. Now, more acres are burned with lightning causes, usually because they're more in remote areas. But I can tell you where I came from, we'd get fires all the time in our interface, and every single one of them, when I'd get there, I'd look, where's the burn barrel? Because you could always work your way back to the illegal burn barrel, and there'd be this little trail of fire till it got into the interface and took off. I can't tell you, it was probably 90% plus of those interface fires were from a burn barrel or a human caused fire. Oh, we got our lightning causes, but they were less than human. They burn more acres, lightning obviously, but 85%. Now the next slide is from California, and this is a recent number. This one should floor you. 95% of fires in California were human caused. And you think about on the news and you see these catastrophic fires burning communities and taking lives, and they're from human causes. It's kind of sickening if you think about it. If it's predictable, it's preventable, right? So that's why we're here tonight. And good citizens, I'm guessing if I said there was a burn ban, Mary, you probably wouldn't burn, would you? I'll be darned. Because you're paying attention to the rules. And somebody that's maybe doesn't pay attention to the rules burns, and now all of a sudden we burn out a neighborhood right? So we have to do our job as solid citizens and good citizens to be able to help the whole problem. So when you have somebody that's burning illegally, what do? Go confront them?
Put it out.
Put it out?
Report it.
Call the fire
Who do you
chief.
report it to?
Fire chief.
You.
Call the fire chief.
Yeah, you can call the non-emergency number at dispatch. Some of you have my line directly, and some of you will call, and that's fine. I think that's what you pay me for, right? But we want to make sure if somebody's burning illegally or doing something wrong that we correct that, right? Whether we extinguish it or have them put it out, or if it's just about done, we say don't do that again if it's not a threat. But we have methods and ways, because that slide should scare you. Just think of all the fires in California, because that's what's on the news, right? The big California wildfires, the big ones in Southern Oregon. We want to not have those happen here. And that's our goal at the end of the day. So yeah, 95%, that's a big, big number.
We need to do smoke-free California instead of smoke-free Oregon.
Right? It's very interesting though if you think about some of those dynamics. So, yeah, I see lots of head nodding and shaking, trying to take this. It took me a bit to take this slide in and what it really means. So, that's a big number. So, we're going to talk a little bit about fire and what it actually does. And this is like a little bit of an educational moment about how fires affect the environment and affect the timber. And then I have a slide on how we suppress it. Just so you got some more knowledge about what wildfire and its makeup. So there's always been, you always talk about fires that, we've had fires for all of history, right? Before we were here, there was fires. Lightning had come down or something had happened. I know Native Americans, they would burn the prairies off every year, right? You've heard those stories. But what was happening there? They were good fires. There's good fire and bad fire. And I think it's important just as an educational piece to know that. So a low intensity fire that burns down the underbrush, kind of creeps around, is a good fire. It doesn't create enough heat. It makes for better soil. So after a fire goes through one year, the next year, somebody said something about that house that would green up all around it. Well, a low intensity fire like that does, and it's beautiful. I mean, it's lush and green, and the soil actually gets nutrients in it to be better than it was before. Those are good fires, and that's why you'll see like the Forest Service, the state, they'll have prescribed burns, and they'll usually do them in the spring. They'll do them when the fire behavior isn't so large, and burn out large areas and get the underbrush cleared out because there's good fire. Now, when you get late in the year, it's been a drought year, and these fires get going and they get super hot, you get this high intensity fire. And I don't know if anybody's drove to Bend lately. Anybody go to Bend? Sisters? See Central? That canyon up through Detroit and all through there, Mill City, it cooked in 2020. And it was a high intensity fire. I can show you spots in the gorge. I was talking from 1989. It was a high intensity fire. And there's still poles sticking up there that the trees and nothing is growing around them. And that's, let's just say a few years ago, right? Nothing grows. So high intensity fire can be bad. Some of it is on suppression. Some of it is on environmental. There's a lot of different factors that cause this, but know that high intensity fire is bad. That's when the forests don't come back for years. It just basically nukes the soil. It just cooks it. So good fire we want. Well, we would welcome more than, because if it doesn't burn, what happens?
It keeps growing and becomes more of a hazard.
Yeah, so good fire should happen, kind of in a managed forest, should happen periodically. That may be 100 years apart. Forest life is way different than our lives or growing a garden or something. It takes time. It takes time to get into these, but just know that I think the trend is some places is, well, anybody ever been to LeGrand, Oregon? Gone from Pendleton to LeGrand? And you'll notice as you go over the Blue Mountains, there's spots of timber and then open areas. And spots, that was done purposely. That was done through the Oregon State, or United States Forest Service. That was one of their pilot programs of thinning. And guess what happens if they get a fire there? It's always manageable. They haven't had a large catastrophic fire there because they manage that forest in a way that it can't just burn it all. So there's a balance in there. Don't ask me where it's at. I'm not a expert, but it's very interesting because if you can keep the fires like this, you have healthy forests.
I have a question.
Yes.
If that was a successful pilot, why hasn't it been done more widely or even earlier?
I think the simplest answer to that is politics.
I have a feeling.
I think honestly the simplest answer is politics.
Yeah.
And there's good and bad to all that. I like to use the word common sense a lot. And I think sometimes we forget the common sense approach to thinning, to management. It's like logging roads. They're kind of bad in a way when they leave a scar through the timber, but it gives us a fire break. It gives us a place to work on fire. So it's already pre-done. So there's some things that are good, bad, and different. You can debate. We could sit here for 3 days debating these. But the point being, if you can keep the fires low and slow, yeah, and it gives us a better chance to suppress them too, or manage them. You'll see some of these high mountain fires. I know there's one over east a couple years ago, and if you ever read a report on them, they'll say they're gonna let the fire burn without any suppression techniques in the wilderness if they're creeping around, because they know it's a good fire, and they say the words to meet management objectives, and it's a good thing. And you'll see that every year, these fires in the wilderness doing that. So there's some good things to this. But yeah, no high intensity fire bad. It just nukes the forest. So I talked a little bit about what we do, just so you know. There's some basic techniques we use, and they're very interesting. There's types of fire breaks. There's man-made, and that is when you see the fireman out cutting the line. Yeah, that's always fun. There's nothing like a Pulaski or an axe, and you build, and mineral soil doesn't burn. If the dirt's burning, I'm gonna be somewhere else. So we clear a path. And I tell you what, in the sagebrush, I've cleared a path as narrow as this that'll stop fire in grass this tall. So you just go, we call it a scratch line, and we would scratch line as fast as we could, and guess what? The fire stops. Now, in timber, uphill, heavy brush, now that line might need to be 50 yards wide, depending on the fuel types. And that is always a factor, but we'll cut line. We like to use roads. Roads are our favorite because they're already there. It gives us a spot we can egress quickly, we can attack the fire, or natural like a creek or a river. They're amazing. Now I've seen fire jump rivers and some big ones, and some big creeks. But if it's that kind of fire, you're gonna have to look at different management objectives, and that's where the fire department, we do a lot of what you see on the other side. And that has become one of our biggest techniques we've used to suppress fire, is fight fire with fire. Everybody's heard the term, but we do a lot of that. I'm gonna tell you, if you have the house at the bottom of the hill and the fire's coming at you, when it gets probably 20 yards or when it starts getting warm, I'll light a fire right behind your house and we'll burn it back into it. That way we got no fuel there. Because that's one of the things we need to take out, right? So that's what they're doing on the other side of the creek there, is they're keeping the fire as low and slow as they can, but they're burning it back, so that fire's gonna go out. You'll get a big old roaring fire burning right at you, and we'll just light fire right down in front of your feet there. Burn it back to myself, and guess what? Done. So that's one of our techniques. And sometimes I like to explain that because a lot of people don't understand that we do a lot of fire suppression with fire. In fact, over east where I came from, there were days I never used a gallon of water. But I used every drip torch I had and every fusee I had, and we burned all night. And in the morning, guess what? Fire was out. Different techniques, different places. But sometimes, I gotta tell you, the downside to back burning, sometimes we make too big a ring around the fire and we end up burning too many acres. That's one of the things that I think as a fire service, we gotta be careful with. Be careful how we use the fire, not to burn acres, but to stop the fire. Use it for suppression. But to me, anybody have any questions on that? Or about what we do to suppress your fire? Here we're gonna probably use a lot of water, to be honest with you. We have an abundance. We really do. It's crazy what a few thousand gallons of water will do, and we can definitely put that out quickly. So we have a pretty good handle on things. I look at fires like this. What does this conjure in your mind? I don't know. Is it a bad fire? That was what I really the quick gut reaction of, not in my backyard. We don't want this to happen, right? Yeah. Can this happen? Absolutely. Can it happen in Nehalem? Can it happen in Bay City? Can it happen to any of us? So we want to be prepared for this kind of stuff. And that is where you pay me for, to guide you. But then I have to put the burden back on you as citizens and say, you got to help me with this. Because I have the tools to fight fire, and great tools, by the way. But I need your help so I don't lose everybody's house. Yeah. So that's what we're after today, is being prepared, being ready. Pretty simple, straightforward slide there. So are you ready? That becomes the question. And this next slide, some of you already took the handout. But in the event, and we'll still have to figure out notification system, but this Ready, Set, Go program, you'll see this on the news sometimes. You'll see that the community of Detroit has been set to level 2. Okay, you'll hear those terms. Now you know what those mean. So level 1 is be ready. And that, I hope, as this preparedness group, most of us are ready. You got a go bag? Got your essential documents ready to go? You can go at a moment's notice, right? Okay, so that's the be ready part. Have it ready to go. So most of us are prepared for that portion. The second one is be set. So if the fire, maybe the fire's kind of just burning on the ridge over that way, and my house is over here. Well, maybe the wind shifted. Maybe the fire lined up with topography and now it's burning towards you. We're going to tell you, you might want to be really ready to go. Be set. At a moment's notice, you need to be out of here. And then 3, this fire's coming, you need out of here. Do you have to go? If I say evacuate, do you?
No. Can you force people?
I can't, but the sheriff's office sure can. And now, I expect if you put up the big fight and say, by gosh, I'm staying, that really at the end of the day, you do have your rights. But when the sheriff's coming knocking on your door saying, you need to go, they're not doing it because there's no threat. It's an imminent threat. Fire's coming. I've only had to do that one time. I always love this story because we always practice this in our county. We had one of the first emergency management groups countywide in Mount Hare County. We had everybody, the sheriffs, the fire departments, the ambulances, the health department. I mean, everybody come once a month. We drilled and we practiced, and we were probably top notch. The night we had the catastrophic wildfire just outside the city of Vail, we were on a fire. I come back, I should have put that picture in. I've got a picture of one of the lightning strikes starting the fire. Somebody, an amateur, had taken the picture where it started. But it burned down this hill, and it was where I had lined of houses. Grass right up to the back of every one of them. I was limited on resources because there was fires everywhere. We had lightning struck fires in 3 counties there. We were busy. No time to go for conflagration because there was not going to get there in time. So I pull a radio up and I said, hey, I need to activate the sheriff's office. They need to come and evacuate houses. Dispatch says what? They're on their way. No, they're on a huge marijuana raid in southern part of the county. They were 100 miles away and no help. So I had to turn around to my division guys and go, guess what? We just became cops. And we evacuated. Everybody was very compliant. We got everybody out. Nobody was hurt. But it was interesting because sometimes you have to improvise. If you don't have a phone, don't have a way to, be aware. We're going to have to figure out a way to notify everybody. But it isn't always the sheriff. I learned that. But that go now is usually law enforcement. And they're very good at it. And they will come and let you know, hey, the threat is imminent, get out. And I hope most people would heed that advice. I have a slide and a joke coming up in a minute. But it's really true of how things work. So the presentation's almost over and we're going to go to questions. But this was the theme of the night: plan, prepare, and prevent. So we're going to clean out around our houses. We're going to be ready to go if we need to go. We're going to do the things in the community to be set for this problem. So I'll ask for questions. Yeah, every now and then I get one right. But I thought this was a good one for that. And then I have some slides that are interesting after this just for general discussion. So did I spur any questions? I see a lot of thinking and digesting of the information. Go ahead, we'll start with Mary.
Since the wildfire is like at the edge of our, the potential wildfire is at the edge of our city, but it's privately owned timber company, does your fire department have some kind of a working agreement with them for fire suppression or anything? Or?
Nope, it's out of our district. That is Oregon Department of Forestry.
Oh, okay.
And they have an agreement with them. And then we have an agreement with Oregon Department of Forestry. So we're able to help them suppress that, yes. So if they had a fire on this hill, which I think they did in the past, Pat, did they have a fire up there?
Over 20 years ago or so.
Yes.
It's scary.
It was right back here.
Yeah, and it burned about 70 acres from what I was told.
About where you're gonna be building a new fire station up.
Yeah, right in, and that is right.
It was real windy and it just kept popping over the hill. There was, when you were up on top, you could just see all these big
Yeah.
things going on.
Exactly. So that means we have a threat
Yeah.
in our interface. And that's the important takeaway tonight. And it has happened. It has potential to happen again. And we'll talk about why. Maybe I should do that right now. So what contributes to fire growth? What should we be worried about here? Wind. Wind is probably our number one, right? So we can even go to the beach for a minute and go with beach grass. There's different types of fuel types, right? So it could rain. It rained yesterday, right? But the wind blew and the sun was out today. Do you think that beach grass would burn?
Yes.
Absolutely, right? It's a 1 hour fuel. I used to teach wildland classes all the time. And in the morning, it'd be like frost on the grass. The dry, dead grass from the previous year. Because we always did these in the winter. And I'd go grab a handful of that wet, soaking wet grass. I'd grab 2 handfuls actually. And I'd grab 1 handful and I'd put it in on the sidewalk in the sun. And I'd take the other handful into the class and I'd take it and I'd wring the water out of it. That's how I started my class. And I said, look how wet this grass, do you think you could get this grass to burn today? And what does everybody say? Oh, absolutely not, it's wet. We'd go out at lunch, we'd have our lunch break, and after lunch I'd take them outside to that grass. I laid it in the sun. And guess what I'd do? I'd light it on fire and it'd burn. It's 1 hour fuel for a reason. It takes about an hour to dry it out. So that's even like you get on a fire and you're suppressing it and a rainstorm comes through. Well, it doesn't mean that there wasn't hot embers still there that can flash up again in an hour. So we always took that. Now, you get in bigger timber and you get fuels that are like 10-hour fuels, and they may be a branch that big around. Well, it takes a little more to dry it out, right? So it doesn't just burn. You can't just put a Bic lighter to it and get it to burn. And as fuel gets bigger and bigger, it has a longer time to dry out. So we're very fortunate here. Most of our interface is full of 10+ hour fuels. So we do have some grass, but very minimal. We do it on the beach though, don't we? So that's always a constant threat. Every day, wintertime, it's even a threat. That's why, like Lieutenant showed me, they have this little flyer and it talks about fire safety. I liked the handout she had. But to make sure you keep the fire 50 foot from the beach. We're hiring our seasonals right now, and that's one of their goals is to run the beach all the time, telling people, hey, you gotta move your fire away from the, that's what we do. Education is everything. But fuel type is number one. So you have your different fuels. Wind is the biggest contributing factor probably because a wind-driven fire is more catastrophic. But what else does it take to drive fire? It takes heat in the combustion, but it also takes a low humidity. The lower the humidity, the bigger the burn rate. So when you start getting humidities, like I expect today we're probably 80%, right? It's hard to burn. Even if you wanted to go burn something, it burns kind of slow. It gives us a fighting chance. It's good for the old guy that's, thinking about retiring in a few years. It's good for me. But when the east wind comes September and the temperature climbs and the RH goes down, that's when our true threat is. Because that becomes just a different dynamic to us. It's burning. We're used to getting the ocean breeze and keeping the humidity up. But those east winds, they contribute. So RH, topography. You talked about the fire and how it swirled and moved and jumped over the hills. An uphill fire versus a downhill fire matter. So that gives us a chance here, though. Like I told you earlier, that downhill fire gives us a chance. And fuel types in general. If you were in Southern California and you're in the, what do they call it, chaparrals, and the higher combustible, or we were in Eastern Oregon with the grease brush, or the cheat grass that grow this tall, we're in big trouble, right? If you're up in Alaska and you're in the duff and the frozen tundra, does it burn? Oh, absolutely. But it burns 10 feet underground and you might never see it for 5 years, then all of a sudden it pops back up. Different types of fires. The dry canopies, the amount of heat you can get down low, like you say, if you will go to Detroit, anybody that's seen it, knows that fire had good carry fuel underneath, got it up in the trees, and it just scorched everything. So there's all these factors, temperature, humidity, wind, but we keep an eye on it. Fire weather. Go ahead, please. Get in there, Alicia.
Well, just, for a good example, I mean, I'm sure everybody in this room remembers Labor Day of 2020. That weekend, that had the trifecta. It had all of those elements. So if you could feel how strange it felt outside, while I think there was a fire synonymously going on in every single fire district and everything. So when she's talking about taking care of your own, we're your guys' immediate mutual aid. We had 3 fires in our own district at that time.
Right.
So everyone was tending to those, but as he's talking about, that low relative humidity, that heat and the wind, that is the best visual example I can give you, is that day had all of those things, and that's what contributed to, of course, the Pike Fire was the largest of those. We were all able to tackle those smaller fires with our small fire agencies. We really were. I mean, there were.
Oh yeah.
There were I grew up in Tillamook, and so we had a moment where there was a little bit of downtime, and I was listening to one of the guys, and it came over the radio that the hangar was on fire, and I remember the burning of the first hangar and everything, and I was like, what? And it was right down next to the hangar, but anyway. But just as he's talking about that, that's such a visual example of all of those elements. In fact, the whole fire crew was at my house for lunch that day, and the weather hadn't shifted, and we were like, what's this weather? And it was like something out of Mary Poppins, winds from the east. Like it just completely shifted, and so
the smoke came in, the sky turned colors. It was that whole big event. And I will say, add this, what Alicia says, there are backup. Right now, today, if we have a fire, there are backup. Well, they were fighting their own fires. So then it becomes it's kind of like you're on your own. And that does face some additional challenges because we rely on each other. On a normal day, hey, come on down and play. That's a little flippant, but it's kind of true. But I will say that too. I was in Lincoln City. So I got bumped to Lincoln City, which was very interesting because I saw Pike Road burning, and it was a good fire, but we went to Lincoln City. And I have never on the coast seen fire behavior like that. It reminded me of being in Eastern Oregon again. Complete houses were getting burned. It burned through a housing development,
Was that in Otis?
That was in Otis. I went out that highway that night when it was burning, and then we spent a lot of time actually in the residential area catching the little fires that were spotting over. But one of the things that kind of Alicia was talking about is we rely. Today, if there was a fire, ODF would be here. We'd have aircraft dumping retardant. We'd have all these resources. When it's burning here, the rest of the state's already a tinderbox and probably got fires everywhere. So our resource availability, we were on that fire in Lincoln City with no forestry, no national resources, nothing. And it was like, well, I had a class on that once. Let's see what we can do. It's kind of how we felt. I mean, we had some experience there. It was not like we didn't or we didn't know what we were doing. But that's kind of, in a way, it's kind of how it felt because you're used to that whole team being able to help us. all the time. So that does face an additional challenge for us as a fire suppression. That's why when you do your jobs right, it matters to us. That
Yeah, and one other question that
Sure.
I get asked a lot and everything, fires going on all over the state, and we're sitting here talking about how limited our resources are, and then we're talking about them going out of our districts to help other people. The state and fire marshal's office, and I mean, we're a reactionary, we're a world that acts on, I mean, we wouldn't be having these conversations probably had we not had the fires of 2020. People, when that hit that close to home, it sparked, oh, no pun intended, a whole different conversation. But I actually just last week had gone through talking about areas that had burned, the Jack Fire and the Archie Creek Fire, and went through the areas of like Glide outside of Roseburg, and all of those communities that it burned through, just much like Otis and this. And when you talk to those communities, like everyone is doing their fire-wise. The homes that were burned have now, you know, that insurance is kicked in and they're built new, and we went around and looked at a lot of those homes, and I mean, they have got their perimeter marked, they are metal roofs, I mean, like every single new house was built, and so that's that reactionary. But in terms of being rightfully concerned because it's going to happen this summer, you'll see, there goes the Tillamook County Task Force, and you'll see resources heading out of Tillamook, and that little bit of a panic of like, wait, what about us? What if we get that? And the State Fire Marshal's Office has offered a grant, so the fire departments are able to hire seasonal firefighters to offset any loss of staffing during that time. And so I know for Nehalem, and I'm sure Chief Hesse, because he's an amazing chief, those decisions are made first and foremost that our district is protected.
every day.
If we can't send a resource, we don't send the resource. And, you know, for us, we can send a water tender, because we have two in Nehalem. We can send a brush rig because we have an alternative to that. We send staffing only if we have adequate staffing. But the State Fire Marshal's Office has a seasonal grant to offset that. And I know I get asked that a lot
Right.
north. So.
And that's a great answer. Thank you. Because that seasonal grant, for us, we hire two, and it bolsters the staffing. So, for example, if Nehalem does go out, they know that we have two additional firefighters to help backfill in the county. And so this is all calculated very well. There's no, hey, there's fire, let's all go. We definitely have this figured out where we protect our own first. But if Glide needs help, they're burning, they're desperate. The state has a Conflagration Act, which I'm sure some of you probably heard about the Conflagration Act. And there's 36 fire defense boards in the state of Oregon. Each county has one. And like today, we actually had a drill. So they activated a mock incident, and we got our practice activations, practice resource requests, and it's a great program. They used to just wait till the big fire was happening somewhere. Now, like last year, they pre-positioned resources because they knew a lightning event was like coming to Central Oregon. So they take some of our structural task forces and pre-position them so we can get on these fires where they're small. And they had huge success last year, huge. Cost millions of dollars, I'm gonna tell you right off the bat, but the state fire marshal, she's got things dialed in. She's been working on the task or these Conflagration Act and mobilization since I started as a chief back, let's just say early 2000s. And she's developed a wonderful program to make sure if you have needs, or Rockaway has needs, or Nehalem has needs, they're coming. Somebody's coming, and that helps. So, great catch on that seasonal program. We may need some support this year because it's not funded for next year yet. The legislature did not put that in the budget. So, I talked to the state fire marshal. She's going to ask for letters of support. And she's very strong. She'll push every bit she can to get this taken care of.
Who is our state fire marshal?
You would ask. Her last name is Ruiz Temple. Chief Temple, Rui's Temple is amazing. Yeah, she's been there for a few years and she knows her stuff. Go ahead, Nancy.
For both of them, during the 2020,
Yes.
the farmers came through with farm equipment to clear, to make pathways. Have you guys ever considered, just like we're doing so much in Rockaway Beach, so we're very...
It's, that's a loaded question. Yeah, oh, these were both, well, go ahead. You want to start?
Well, we
It's-
have good working relationships with all of our farmers and
Yes.
our contractors. And then we also have an ongoing resource list where we update that with local contractors, what they have for an excavator, their cell phone numbers, and how to get a hold of them. And it's all in our command books for whatever incident. In fact, we had one last time. And it was an outdoor fire, got away, started burning the grass, and every farmer in the Nehalem Valley had a line dug around that sucker, and it was at practically, and we had good response time with our engines, and we got there and went, well.
Yeah, now what do we do? And that's very common. Yeah, where I came from was the same exact way. Here, not so much, because we don't really have that resource like they do up north. We're 1.7 square miles, and we don't have a lot of industry. We don't have a lot of that, but some of the, no, but we do have some of the loggers. And we do have some resource that way that I know if we got up in the timber, we'll get a dozer there. We'll get a,
I have a quick question.
Sure.
At what point in time did we call in South Fork?
we don't have that ability.
I mean, then fire.
So,
fire marshal.
as any, well, that would be the Oregon Department of Forestry, I guess. Probably would be the IC or a unified command. Then you start just slowly adding resources. That is always a resource, a hand crew. Most of the time they'll pull in just whatever resource available. There's actually a status list every day of what resources nationwide is available. Yes, they keep track nationwide. You'll hear on the news sometimes they'll say like National Preparedness Level 5 means there's almost no engines left anywhere in the state of any of them. But let's say like early in the year, for example, Oregon moves resources down to New Mexico because they burn down in New Mexico. Well, they're done their burn season. They're getting ready to go to the rainy season. So they'll move their resources north. Like BLM, Forest Service, they'll move units north because they know the higher threats here. So you'll see some of that shifting in resources. You'll see engines from the Forest Service be in Texas. ODF was just down in Texas for the grass fires, what, a month ago or 2 months ago? So we share resources. Resources don't know borders. They're available. And we're the same way. We use any local resource we possibly can. Heck, it might be just an excavator to knock a smoldering house down, tear it apart, or stacks of hay. You don't know, use your resources you have available. Absolutely. Okay, what else you got for me?
We had a situation with Lake Lytle about 3 or 4 years ago. The Kearney Road is like a fire road. And unfortunately, the east side of it is maintained by county. And I called several times saying, hey, the grass is like 4 feet high. It's extremely dry. And they said, we'll just put it on our books. And it was never cut down. This year it's actually done very good. But the question is where we have a jurisdictional situation. At the end of the Kearney, the south end, there's this giant, huge field that 5 years ago was full of 4 foot high grass. And I called that in a couple of times. Well, it's private property. We really can't do much about that.
And that kind of goes back to ordinance. If the grass gets too tall, that you have to be able to do something. Again, that's exactly right, Bill.
It's been fixed now because it's now completely dry, but
still, those are those concerns.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we were kind of addressing earlier with tall grass, or what did I do if my neighbor doesn't comply? Contact me if you have issues like that, because I can usually go out and have a good talk with somebody. Usually, doesn't always work, does it, Catherine?
Well, I think it's really important because in the case he's talking about, a neighbor, he not only had the burn barrel, which was fires, he had his propane tank like 3 feet away from his truck, and he had the burn barrel underneath the awnings of his house. And he burns constantly, and so we asked Chief Hesse, please don't tell him it was me. It's like,
Right. He has no idea.
And so he talked to him, and the guy, you would think they would know, but they don't. They're just really unconscious. And so he's had to come out several times, and the man does now take the barrel out, and he has to sit and watch it, but now it just smokes, and he does it every other day.
You think common sense will ever come back?
No. Pretty sure it's a rare commodity.
It's not common.
It's not so common, and that's always been my catchphrase, because it isn't. Common sense is not very common anymore. But I'm going to show you a couple more slides, and they're cartoons. The rest is cartoons, but there's a point to each one of them. And I want you to kind of have just a general discussion. We'll start with something real easy. This kind of goes to what we're talking about, right? You know, the common sense, where, you know, just because you can have a campfire, should you? No. Sometimes no. The answer is no. But they do, because they're, especially, and I don't like to pick on tourists at all. I call them visitors. But what happens when you are on vacation, just to general to anybody, all of us, we're complacent a little bit because, hey, we're on vacation. We're just cutting loose, relaxing. What can possibly go wrong? The other day I was going Code 3 at about 15 miles an hour because there was a lot of traffic coming through town. And people were stopping. What did that make people do? Cross the street. They were lights and siren activated and having to stop and watch for a lady pushing her stroller across the street. Okay, I have to shut the siren off because I'm not going to make the baby deaf. But at the same time, could you wait a second? Could you see the big red thing with the lights and the siren? So we deal with that all the time. So it's complacency. Maybe this guy's just a tourist. He's here, he's hungry. You know, he's always wanted to have a campfire with good memories as a kid. Smokey was definitely going to address the situation. And I take just the humor out of it. We don't want to beat anybody over the head with a shovel.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay, we're not going there. So this one, you know, these firefighters are working and Smokey's on fire, and that's a bad sign, is right. Means your conditions are bad. And we do get in those spots where the conditions are bad. September of 2020 is a prime example of that, where we went from, with a westerly wind, we wouldn't have burned anything. Easterly wind, we burned everything. This I just put up because I think this is something that symbolizes the fire service in general. So we'll risk our life for a stranger. We would do it. I can look at Alicia in the eye and know that she would do that on a moment's notice with no hesitation. We'd help anybody at any time with no questions asked. So just what we do for people we care about. Think about what we do. I mean, it's a little deep, sorry, but it's really important to know that your fire service here, in fact, I will vouch for all of Tillamook County. You got one of the better fire services county-wide as you can get. You got very, very dedicated folks, well-trained, well-equipped, and ready to meet any challenge. So when you leave here tonight, know that that's a fact. This one I talked earlier about evacuations. And this guy says, evacuate from a wildfire, why? The only life I'm endangering is my own. Is that true? Oh no. Now we have to put you on our radar that you're back some driveway and you're going to be calling. When the fire gets close, you're going to be calling us and we're going to have to try to go in and get you. And I've had to do that a couple times. But got to be thinking not so selfish about yourself. And that's something I want to leave you with too. And then this is the last slide I have. So this can happen. I don't want to scare anybody, but I also want you to be aware that conditions can get pretty rough. And when they get that way, that's when we got to be our most cautious, vigilant. You know, we get people burning in the burn ban, and it's like, what are you doing? Why? You know, or you get people burning now that drive me more nuts. is they just cut down all their trees and they're trying to burn the green. My burn permit says that you will be dry, dry material, no noxious smoke.
Yeah.
Oh, that becomes an issue, doesn't it?
You have to be able to read.
Well, that is a challenge for some, but we're not going there.
They can read, they just don't comprehend.
Or they don't care, and I think that's probably the best one to take away. They don't care. So
It's all about them.
we ran a little over on time, but I think it's important. I want to make sure that you understand everything we talked about tonight. Bill will put this presentation. We'll have it on our website so you can review it. Terry.
I have a question.
You can ask questions all night.
Bernie,
Okay.
now, you state, I believe, that you can only have 3-foot perimeter fire.
Yes. Yeah, that's what we consider for your fire rings you're talking about, or on the beach.
No, behind my house.
Oh yeah, 3 foot is what we like to see. There's a couple that are a little bigger, but if they're all masonry and there's no threat, I'm okay with a little bigger. But we inspect each one of those and we will write you off. If you have a good pit, you'll get a permit. If you don't, we're going to turn you down.
No, this isn't a fire
Yeah.
thing, this is just burning.
Oh, burning? We
Yeah,
like to see it
raise
small.
a flag.
Oh, like a pile, burning a pile. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, piles. Keep them small, keep them manageable. My house, I was burning on a lot, and it was probably 20 by 20, but it was, we had hoses, we had everything we were supposed to, but it was a big fire. But be careful, be vigilant. If you have questions on how big your pile is, or if it can be a threat, call me. I don't mind stopping by and looking at it and go, yeah, you might want to take some of that off. Let's burn half of it today and half of it next week. But that's situational. Good question, though. Yeah, keep them small if you can. Most people are pretty good about just, they clean up their yard, keeping it small. Let it dry out till fall, though, until it rains. And it'll still burn really good in October after the first rain. Everything's damp and wet. Yeah, go ahead and then light it that day. It's foggy and raining. Ain't going nowhere. That's a good day to burn those piles. And that is something, actually, I gotta say, open burning is definitely a debate and a question from a lot of concerned citizens. We might do there's some solutions to that. Maybe you can burn this week and then close it the rest of the time. I don't know, there's some different things to do to kind of get because there's times where the smoke is horrible, but everything's always a dynamic. Everything can change. So if you have concerns, you know where to find me. I'm hiding somewhere. Go ahead, Mary.
For all of us that came to this, what's one thing that we could go home and do first to be fire-wise?
You're going to pick up this little pamphlet on your way out. This is the one I highly recommend because it talks about defensible space for homeowners and renters. It gives you great detail inside with a checklist of things you can look at. And I would take this one home and check each one of your own houses, and we'll go from there. And by the way, if anybody happens to be watching online or this later, come to the fire station or any of your fire stations. We all have pamphlets. We'll also happily come and look at your place with a personal visit. But it starts with you at home, and this is a great little resource to start with. Go ahead,
Oh,
sis.
and just, everybody should also check their homeowners and renters policies annually and know what you have, because there's like a building ordinance on a policy that usually only pay 10%, and we're all in older homes generally down here. So that's something you might want to increase up to 100% or 50%. So know your policies, know what's going to be covered.
That's actually a great point.
Yeah.
Always check your insurance, make sure it's set.
Once a year.
I'm the same way. Every year review all your policies, make sure you're covered.
I can't tell you how many homes I saw, 'cause I worked for State Farm for 34 years, but how many homes I saw that were total burnouts that they did not have enough coverage.
Yeah, and that makes a bad situation even worse.
And there's a lot of parts to a policy. It's not just a blanket coverage, so make sure you really look at it and learn it.
Well said. Anybody else? Anybody else got any questions before we break out? Okay, two things. One, there's cookies in the back. Nobody's eaten a single one, so you must at least grab a cookie on your way out. And two, if you did not sign up, there's a sign-up sheet here on the table. Please sign up. That's how we keep accountability who's showing up. And thank everybody for attending tonight. Very welcome.